The fluorescence in the Jefferson High staff break room hummed a low, tired thrum. Dust motes swam in the weak yellow light. I took a slow sip from my thermos, sludge pretending to be coffee, and studied the new hire. Young, quiet, eyes a little too wide, knuckles white on the mop handle. Good. Silence is better than screaming, usually. "All right," I rasped, setting the thermos down. "Welcome to the graveyard shift. Jefferson High. Daytime, it's algebra and awkward puberty. Nighttime," I gestured towards the darkened hallway beyond the open door. "Nighttime, it's maintenance of a different sort. You listen, you do exactly as I say, and you might make it to sunrise. Deviate? Well, let's just say the severance package is terminal." I pushed myself up, bones creaking in protest. Rule 1. Panic is a dinner bell. Stay quiet, stay calm, stay moving. Rule 2. Your cart is your arsenal. I tapped the battered metal beast beside me. Industrial cleaners? Sure, but the essentials are here. I opened a squeaky drawer. Rock salt, butterscotch candies, the cheap, hard kind. WD-40, a small, very bright flashlight, and a crowbar. Don't ask why. Just know it's not for lockers. I grabbed my cart. Follow. Step where I step. Touch nothing unless I tell you. And for your own sake, breathe shallow in certain areas. The main hall swallowed us. Silence, thick as dust, broken only by the groan of ancient pipes and the squeak of our wheels. Moonlight sliced through high windows, painting long, distorted fingers across the linoleum. "First stop, the science wing," I murmured, voice low. "Poltergeist penguins, 1957 mascots, Bunsen burner mishap. Papier-mâché doesn't burn clean." As we neared biology, a rhythmic tap-tap-tapping started on the lab door windows. Inside, shadowy, flippered shapes darted between tables, knocking beakers with soft clinks. Annoyances, mostly harmless if you don't startle them. Keep your light beam low and steady. Sudden movements, bright flashes. They swarm. Makes mopping impossible. We passed without incident, the tapping fading behind us. Near the old locker bank, a high, thin wail seeped from locker 113. The metal pulsed faintly. The weeper, Agnes Mulligan, 1962, locked in by her prom date, suffocated, still holds on to that sorrow. The wail sharpened, becoming jagged sobs. The locker handle rattled violently. "Salt," I commanded, handing the bag over without looking. A thin line across the base of the door. "Don't spill it." The new hire sprinkled the salt. The rattling ceased. Instantly, the sobs subsided into choked hiccups. Her grief pulls. The salt grounds it. Briefly. Keep moving. The cafeteria stench hit next. Stale grease undercut by something metallic, coppery. The new hire stiffened. "The gremlin," I stated, pointing my light at the large, vibrating garbage bin by the kitchen. "Lives in refuse. Loves sugar. Hates intrusion. Essential stop, unfortunately. Toss a candy into the bin. Underhand. Gently." A small, clawed gray hand shot from the swinging lid, snatched the candy mid-air, and vanished with a wet schlorp. The vibrating stopped. One candy buys 15 minutes. Try to take the trash without paying? Well, let's say the bin gets hungry for more than scraps. Lost a good vacuum to that thing. We passed the main stairwell. A wave of absolute soul-sucking cold washed over us. The shadows at the top thickened, coalescing into a tall, impossibly thin silhouette in a tattered, ankle-length coat. Its face was a smudge of deeper darkness. It didn't move, yet the weight of its regard pressed down like ice. "The stalker," I breathed, barely audible. My own gaze stayed locked on the floor tiles. Never look at it directly. Never acknowledge it. Never, ever go up those stairs after 1:17 a.m. That threshold is his. Break eye contact rule, you become part of the shadow, permanently. Slow steps, eyes down, breathe shallow. We backed away, inch by agonizing inch, until the corner cut off the view. The cold lingered like a bruise. Predictable, like a leaking pipe. Just colder. The second floor felt heavier. The air tasted stale, thick with the smell of old paper and something sweetly rotten. Dust lay thick on the lockers. "Library's quiet tonight. Good. Old man Henderson doesn't like dust. Hears it settle. If you hear a low, discordant hum coming from the shelves, you have 20 seconds. Spray WD-40 on the floor near the central desk. His joints always ached. The smell calms him. Forget, and he'll try to dust you with your own bones." We passed a classroom door slightly ajar. Inside, desks were neatly stacked on the ceiling. The rearranger, harmless prankster, likes order. Just close the door gently. Don't comment, don't stare. The new hire carefully pulled the door shut. Further down, a faint, rhythmic drip, drip, drip echoed. Below a water stain on the ceiling, the floor shimmered wetly, reflecting no light. "The leak," I warned, "not water. Step in it, and it pulls you up, into the stain. Salt barrier around it, wide." We carefully poured a thick circle of salt around the shimmering patch. It seemed to recede slightly. "Sublimates by dawn. Just mark it and avoid." "Third floor," I said, stopping at the base of the narrow attic stairs. The air here was frigid and smelled of ozone and decay. Faint, distorted giggles drifted down. The giggling girls, 1923 fire. They don't know they're gone. Mostly harmless, unless you go up. Their joy is infectious. Permanently. You start laughing, you never stop. We skip the attic, always. Maintenance cleans itself up there, eventually. We descended the service stairs into the true dark. The air was damp, smelling of earth, mildew, and something metallic, like old blood. The boiler thrummed, a monstrous heartbeat. Basement, core of it all. Pay attention. A low, guttural, rasping breath echoed from the shadows beyond the boiler's glow. It sounded wet, heavy. "The blind one," I whispered, switching my flashlight to its dimmest setting. "Doesn't see. Hunts by vibration, by scent, by fear. Move slow, deliberate. Breathe shallow. Your cartwheels are loud. Lift the front, roll it carefully. One squeak, too loud." The rasping grew closer, accompanied by the scrape of something heavy on concrete. Salt won't stop it. Candy won't appease it. If it gets close. I hefted the crowbar meaningfully. Aim for the knees. It hates that. But it's a last resort. Silence is survival down here. We moved like ghosts, the rasping breath fading slightly as we reached the far storage room. Inside, amidst stacked chairs and broken projectors, a single ornate hand mirror lay face up on a crate. Its surface swirled with oily rainbows. "The Watcher," I said, carefully turning it face down with the crowbar. "Looks harmless. Catch your reflection in it after midnight? It borrows your eyes, sees what you see." Forever. Never look into any reflective surface down here without checking it first. Especially puddles. Dawn was a gray smear on the horizon as we ascended the final flight to the roof access. The air was sharp and cold. The massive, ancient school bell loomed in the center. "The bell ringer," I said, checking my watch. 5:55 a.m. "Lonely spirit. Wants to ring one last time. If you're up here when the first true ray of sun hits the bell." I pointed to faint scorch marks radiating outwards from the bell's base. "It rings with you, inside out. We have 5 minutes. Sweep fast. Ignore the whispering." The new hire swept frantically while I watched the horizon. The whispering intensified, promising peace, belonging, a final glorious chime. As the first sliver of sun crested the distant hills, I yanked open the door. "Now! Move!" We stumbled back into the stairwell as the first, pure ray of sunlight struck the bell. Instead of a chime, a silent, concussive wave of pressure slammed the heavy door shut behind us, followed by a soundless scream of frustration that vibrated in our teeth. Back in the staff room, the fluorescence seemed blindingly normal. The new hire leaned against a wall, pale, shaking, but alive. Dawn light filtered weakly through the blinds. I refilled my thermos. "See? Systematic. Each thing has its rule, its weakness, its routine. Salt for sorrow, candy for hunger, WD-40 for order, silence for hunters, darkness for watchers, and timing for the lonely." I took a long swig. You learn the routes, you learn the rules, you respect the dark, and you survive. Forget one detail? I met their wide eyes, my own flat and weary. "Well, we'll need to post another job opening. Clock out. Try to sleep. Tomorrow night, we start on the east wing. Bring extra salt." I pushed my cart towards the exit. The real dread wasn't the basement rasping or the attic giggles. It was the thought of the morning commute. The supernatural was just the job. The horror was the traffic. "East Wing tonight," I announced, the words landing like stones in the fragile quiet. The new hire's eyes snapped to mine, wide again, but with a flicker of something else now. Not just terror, but wary comprehension. Different beast, older, built on the ruins of the original schoolhouse. Foundations are porous. More things seeped in, forgotten things. I pushed my cart toward the service corridor leading east. Rules still apply. Salt, candy, silence. But the stakes? Higher. Deviations aren't just messy down there. They're irreversible. I paused at the heavy, reinforced fire door separating the main building from the east wing. It felt colder than the surrounding metal. This isn't just cleaning. It's containment. You ready? No answer, just the tightening of grip on their mop handle. Good enough. The east wing air hit like a physical blow. Damp, thick, smelling of wet stone, decaying wood, and something vegetal and sickly sweet like rotting lilies. The lights, fewer and further between, buzzed erratically. Shadows pooled deeper here, clinging to corners like tar. "Hall of Portraits first," I murmured, voice barely disturbing the oppressive silence. Dozens of dusty, gilt-framed portraits lined the walls, depicting stern-faced founders and forgotten teachers. Their eyes seemed to track us. The gaze. Don't meet any painted eye for more than 3 seconds. They borrow focus. Borrow it long enough. I pointed my flashlight beam deliberately at the floor. They borrow you. Fill the frame. Keep moving. Peripheral vision only. A low, rhythmic thumping started ahead, like a massive, slow heartbeat. It emanated from a closed classroom door marked Industrial Arts. The sculptor, I said, stopping well back. Former shop teacher. 1948. Accident with a lathe. Doesn't need tools anymore. Finds raw material. If you hear the thumping, do not open the door. If it stops suddenly. I gestured towards the heavy padlock I'd affixed to the door handle years ago. That means it's listening. Hold your breath until it starts again. Then retreat. Slowly. This door stays locked. Always. Descending narrow, uneven stone stairs felt like entering a tomb. The air grew colder, damper, the sickly sweet smell intensifying, mixed now with loam and a faint, acrid tang. Thick, fibrous roots snaked through cracks in the walls and ceiling, pulsing faintly with a dim internal light. The mycelium, I whispered, my breath frosting. It breathes spores. Deep breaths here are inadvisable. Makes you see things, pleasant things. Makes you want to stay. Close to the roots. Forever. I pulled 2 cheap painter's masks from the cart drawer, handing one over. Keeps the worst out. Doesn't stop the whispers, though. As we moved, faint, overlapping voices sighed from the walls. Promises of warmth, belonging, endless rest. Ignore them, I said, my own voice tight. Focus on the path, on the salt. I sprinkled a thin line behind us as we walked, the crystals hissing faintly where they touched the damp stone. Slows the spread, doesn't kill it. Nothing kills it. Ahead, the corridor opened into a small circular chamber. In the center grew a massive, pale, pulsing fungus, its surface glistening wetly. Tendrils snaked out, probing the air. The heart, I stated flatly. Salt ring, thick, now. We worked quickly, pouring a dense circle of salt around the perimeter of the chamber. The probing tendrils recoiled from the barrier, the whispering rising to a frustrated hiss. This is the anchor. Weaken it, the whole wing gets lively. Salt needs replenishing weekly. Your job now. Climbing back up, we approached the old auditorium. Faint, discordant piano notes drifted through the heavy double doors. Not a melody, but random, jarring strikes. The choir, I explained, my hand resting on the crowbar tucked into my cart. Trapped performers. 1918 flu. They practice endlessly, badly. If you hear actual singing. I paused as a single, off-key soprano note warbled through the door, sending shivers down my spine despite myself. That means they've noticed an audience. They demand an audience. They'll pull you in. Crowbar the doors shut if you hear singing. Wedge it good, then run. Don't look back. We passed without incident, the piano clanging erratically behind the sealed doors. Heading back towards the main building corridor, a new sound froze us. A high, frantic scrabbling coming from inside the wall near the reinforced door. Like rats, but heavier. Much heavier. Damn, I breathed. Genuine annoyance cutting through my usual monotone. Basement breach. The blind one must have nosed a weak spot. The scrabbling intensified, punctuated by a wet, guttural snuffling. Plaster dust sifted down. It smells us. Fear. Exertion. Salt won't hold it if it breaks through. I hefted the crowbar. New rule. Sometimes containment fails. Then you enforce the perimeter. I braced myself beside the trembling patch of wall. When it comes through, and it will, Aim low, hard, the knees, then run. Don't stop for anything. Head straight for the break room. The fluorescence irritated. The new hire stared at the wall, then at the crowbar in my hand, then back at the wall. Their knuckles were bone white again, but they didn't bolt. They shifted their grip on the mop handle, holding it like a quarterstaff. The plaster exploded inward. A hunched, leathery mass of shadow and raw, glistening muscle surged through, blind head swinging on a thick neck, nostrils flaring, jaws snapping at the air where our scent hung thickest. It lunged towards the new hire. I swung the crowbar low and hard. It connected with a sickening crack on the thing's thick knee tendon. The blind one roared, a sound of pure animal fury and pain that vibrated in our teeth, stumbling sideways. "Now!" I bellowed. The new hire didn't need telling twice. They spun and ran, not screaming, but moving with desperate, silent speed. I backed away, keeping the crowbar raised, facing the enraged entity as it scrabbled to regain its footing, its blind head swiveling towards me, drawn by my movement and the lingering scent of my strike. I tossed a handful of salt into its snapping maw. It hissed, recoiling, buying precious seconds. I turned and ran, the thunderous limping pursuit echoing behind me. I slammed the reinforced door shut, just as a massive weight slammed into it from the other side, buckling the metal. I threw the heavy deadbolt, then braced the crowbar diagonally under the handle. The pounding continued, furious, relentless. In the break room, the new hire was bent double, gasping silently into their mask, eyes wide with residual terror. The fluorescents hummed their mundane song. I leaned against the wall beside the shuddering door, listening to the frustrated roars and thuds slowly subside into pained, wet snuffling and eventually a retreating scrape. I took a long, shaky pull from my thermos. The sludge was cold now. It tasted like survival. "Basement breach," I rasped, wiping grime and plaster dust from my face. "Happens. We contained it. Reinforced the perimeter." I glanced at the new hire. They met my gaze, their breathing slowly steadying. There was still fear, yes, but also a hard new understanding in their eyes. The understanding that knowledge wasn't just power here. It was the thin line between mopping floors and becoming part of the foundation. East Wing protocol held. Mostly. I gestured towards the salt bag. "You'll need to double the Heart's ring tomorrow, and check the Art's door padlock." I pushed my cart towards the exit. Dawn was properly breaking now. "Good work. You didn't freeze. You didn't scream." A pause. "You didn't whistle. Clock out. Get some sleep." The reinforced door gave one final, ominous groan behind us. The real horror wasn't the commute this morning. It was the paperwork for structural damage caused by vermin. The supernatural was manageable. Bureaucracy, now that was truly terrifying. The fluorescent buzz of the staff room felt thinner lately. More temporary. I stared at the letter on the chipped Formica table, crisp, official, bearing the school district seal, acceptance of early retirement, pension, benefits, freedom. Outside, dawn bled gray at the edges of the blinds. The new hire, Jimmy. I'd learned his name after the East Wing breach, though he still rarely used it, leaned against his cart watching me. He wasn't pale anymore. His eyes held the flat, assessing gleam of seasoned night marble. He understood the weight of the silence now. "Tonight's the last circuit, Jimmy," I rasped, folding the letter and tucking it into my coveralls. "Full tour, every floor, every resident. Consider it your final exam. Pass, and these I jangled the heavy brass master keys on their steel ring. Are yours. Fail? I met his gaze. Well, Jefferson High gets a new, permanent resident. He gave a single sharp nod. No tremor, just readiness. We moved through the familiar dreadscapes with practiced efficiency. The routine was a worn groove, a liturgy against the dark. Ground floor. Jimmy salted Agnes's locker without prompting, the sobs subsiding instantly. He tossed a butterscotch into the gremlin's bin with perfect underhand precision. Passing the main stairs, the stalker's glacial presence loomed. Jimmy didn't flinch, his eyes fixed firmly on the worn path ahead of his cartwheels. Good. Instinct. Second floor. The rearranger had stacked devs into a precarious pyramid. Jimmy closed the door gently. No reaction. At the leak's shimmering patch, he poured a thick, precise salt barrier without needing direction. The library was silent. Old Man Henderson resting easy tonight. East Wing. In the gallery of whispers, Jimmy kept his flashlight beam low, his gaze never lingering on a painted eye. He checked the padlock on the industrial arts door, still secure, the sculptor's rhythmic thumping a grim lullaby. In the root cellar's oppressive gloom, he donned his mask without hesitation. His salt line behind us, neat and effective. At the mycelium heart, he replenished the barrier with meticulous care, ignoring the seductive whispers sighing from the pulsating mass. The discordant piano clanged from the auditorium. Jimmy didn't slow. The basement. Silence reigned supreme. We lifted the cartwheels over every crack. The blind one's wet, rasping breath echoed from the deep shadows near the boiler, but it remained distant, perhaps remembering the crowbar. Jimmy turned the watcher's mirror face down with the tip of his own crowbar. He'd started carrying one months ago. Smart. Dawn was a faint promise as we pushed open the roof access door. The air was knife cold. The massive bell stood silent and dark against the paling sky. 5:55 a.m. Last stop, I said, my voice sounding strangely loud in the open air. The bell ringer. Same rules. Sweep fast. Ignore the whispers. Watch the horizon. Jimmy moved with quiet efficiency, his broom whisking debris towards the drain. The whispering started, faint at first, like leaves rustling, then coalescing into voices, soft and achingly familiar. Promises of peace, of an end to the watch, of finally ringing true. I felt the pull, deeper than ever. Retirement beckoned with a similar quiet. Stay, a voice sighed, sounding like my long-dead father. One chime. For closure. I clenched my jaw, focusing on Jimmy. He paused for a fraction of a second, his head tilting slightly, then resumed sweeping, his movements becoming even more deliberate. His gaze fixed firmly on the task, not the whispering bell. Resisting. Good. The first sliver of sun, molten gold, breached the distant hills. It struck the bell's upper curve. Now! I barked. We moved as one, lunging for the doorway. As we crossed the threshold, a wave of silent, concussive fury erupted behind us, slamming the heavy door shut with enough force to rattle the frame. The soundless scream of frustration vibrated through the metal, then faded into the growing light. Back in the staff room, the fluorescence felt harsh, final. I poured the last of the sludge from my thermos. Jimmy stood by his cart, breathing steadily, watching me. No triumph, just quiet readiness. The weight of the night, of countless nights settled on my shoulders, suddenly heavy with the prospect of lifting. I unhooked the brass key ring. It felt cold, solid, imbued with decades of responsibility and dread. I held it out. "Rules hold, Jimmy," I said, my voice rough. "Salt for sorrow, candy for hunger, WD-40 for order, silence for hunters, darkness for watchers, timing for the lonely, crowbar for breaches." I met his eyes. The stalker claims the stairs at 117. The bell ringer hungers at dawn. The mycelium whispers. The blind one listens. Remember them all. Forget one. I didn't finish. He knew. He'd seen the cost. He reached out, his hand, calloused now, steady, closed over the keys. His grip was firm. He gave one final, decisive nod. No words. None were needed. He understood the contract written in salt and shadow. I slid the folded retirement letter onto the table beside my empty thermos. East Wing salt needs doing Monday. Gremlins developed a taste for the orange candies. Avoid the green ones. I shrugged into my worn jacket. Place is yours now, Jimmy. Try not to redecorate too much. I walked towards the exit, the familiar dread of rush hour already coiling in my gut. As I pushed open the door, flooding the dim room with weak morning light, I paused. Jimmy stood silhouetted against the humming fluorescence, the keys glinting in his hand, already surveying his silent, haunted kingdom. He didn't look back. I stepped out into the mundane world. The screech of distant traffic greeted me. The real horror, I thought, pulling my collar up against the chill, was finally facing the daylight without a mop. And the commute. Always the damn commute. I left Jefferson High behind, its ancient size and hungry shadows now someone else's problem. Jimmy's shift had just begun.